Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking a look at the first game of the Svidler Shankland match played in Hoogeveen, Netherlands. This is going to be a 6-game match lasting till October 27th. In this game, Shankland has the white pieces and Svidler with the black pieces. Shankland opens with d4, knight f6 from Svidler, c4 and g6. So black is either intending to go for the King's Indian defense or the Grunfeld defense with d5. White plays f3 supporting e4, but this does have the drawback of taking away the f3 square from the knight. c5 from Svidler, trying to challenge white's central pawn, and d takes c5. So here d5 is also playable. White doesn't ruin his pawn structure immediately, and he is preparing to play e4. But anyway, here d takes c5 from Shankland. And queen to a5 seems like the normal move in this position. So after knight takes c3, then you can recapture this pawn. And white would have to waste some tempo to chase this queen away from this g1 h7 diagonal in order to castle. But here Svidler decides to go for e6, which opens up an attack on this pawn on c5. So that is defended with bishop e3 and b6 from Svidler. We have c takes b6, a takes b6, bishop to g5, h6, bishop h4, and here Svidler plays d5, trying to sharpen up the position, since white's king will find it a bit difficult to castle due to this knight and bishop being undeveloped. So here c takes d5, e takes d5, and at the moment black is a pawn down, but he still has compensation because white will take a bit of time to develop his pieces, especially this knight and bishop. So white goes e3, making room for this bishop to develop. Bishop c5, looking at the e3 pawn. We have bishop b5 check, so white wants to develop with tempo. Bishop d7, white trades off the bishops. And knight c3. Shankland doesn't waste any time at all, now he is attacking the pawn on d5. And Svidler castles, so if this pawn is taken, then black can go g5, and after bishop to f2, knight takes d5, knight takes d5. At the end of the variation, black has bishop to b4 check. So this king has to go to f1 because you cannot block with a piece, and black has good compensation here. So after castles, knight g to e2 from Shankland, a good decision. He needs to develop and bring his king to safety. So we have queen to e8 from Svidler, unpinning the knight. Bishop f2. Bishop takes e3, bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, and queen to d4. So if that is taken, then this structure-wise, white would be better because of black's weak pawns. So understandably, Svidler didn't go for this. He drops the queen back. White castles, and we have rook f to c8 and rook f to d1. So it's not easy at all for black to defend this pawn on d5. Best move for black is probably to play rook to c4. Let's say, for example, white goes queen to d2, then knight to f8. Black is hoping to get in rook to d8, and this knight can also jump into e6. But here Svidler plays knight to e5, hoping that if queen takes b6, then black can go knight c4, attacking the queen and the pawn on b2. And the queen can't really defend, for example, queen to b3, because you can always bring a rook to b8. So here after queen to f2, then you simply take on b2. Black is okay here. But after knight to e5, Shankland just goes knight to f4. And the problem with knight to e5 move is also that, well, for one, this stops any queen takes e2 tactics after knight takes d5 because the knight blocks the e file from the queen. But also now after knight to f4, this knight looks a bit shaky because of ideas like rook coming to e1. So now this pawn is attacked 3 times. Rook to c4. And knight f takes d5 from Shankland. So this comes with a tempo on the queen. Black has to take the knight. Otherwise, if, for example, if rook takes d4, knight takes e7 with check, followed by rook takes d4, and white is winning. So here after knight takes d5, queen takes d5, rook to a5, and queen to d8 check. So Shankland decides to enter into the endgame. And king g7, rook a to d1, rook to c6. So white is a pawn up, but converting this is not so easy. Shankland goes rook to b8, looking at the b6 pawn, and also white may be preparing to double on the back rank. Knight c4, looking at b2, rook d to d8, and here if black were to take on b2, then knight to e4 is very strong, controlling the f6 square, and this creates a mating net around black's king. With ideas like giving a check here, then bringing this rook over. So here black plays king to f6, b3 kicking away this knight, knight to e5, knight to e4 check. Here the computer recommends king to e6. This is probably safer instead of what Svidler played. But in the game, Svidler goes king f5. Rook to d2. A good move from Shankland, stopping black from going rook to c2. King f4 from Svidler. So Svidler definitely not shying away from activating this king. So he is preparing king to e3. Therefore, white stops that with king to f2. Knight to g4 check. So after f takes g4, black regains the knight here because now the knight is undefended. And a4 from Shankland. We have rook a to c5 from Svidler and h3 from white. Shankland now wants to keep everything intact. Rook c3, looking at b3, rook to e8 check, king to f4, rook to d4 check, king g5. Here an interesting option instead of rook d4 check was to play g3. And after king g5, then rook to e3. Well, if black takes, then after king takes e3, white will use his queenside majority to win the game. And black's king is on the wrong side of the board. So here, for example, after rook 3 to c5, then rook to f3. And here white wants to go rook d4 and h4. So g3 is an interesting option in this position, but Shankland goes rook d4 check. King g5, then rook to e5. Then he hangs on to this pawn on b3. Rook c2 check, king g3, and rook to e6. Shankland goes rook to d3, stopping any checks on the third rank. We have king g7. Black wants to go rook e to e2, but this falls to rook takes b6, and white is winning because of these two connected passers. So therefore he goes king to g7 first, and we have king to h2 from Shankland, making room for rook coming to g3 to defend the g2 pawn. Svidler goes rook to b2, we have h4, rook e to e2, rook g3 defending this pawn on g2, rook to h6, and Shankland plays h5, trying to create some weaknesses, hoping for black to go g5. Rook d6, we have rook to b4, and now Svidler makes some inaccuracies, which makes things a lot easier for white. After g5, rook b5, then f6 from Svidler. Very questionable move because this opens up the 7th rank. And with this weakness on h6, black is just objectively lost. Rook to c3 from Shankland. So maybe with ideas of rook to c7. Rook to e2 from Svidler. And rook to b4. So it's clear now what Shankland's idea is. He wants to go rook c4 and rook to c6, trying to win this pawn on b6. And white would have two connected passers, and this would be simply winning for white. After king f7, rook b to c4, king e6 from Svidler. And now rook to c8. So now Shankland changes ideas. He is just going after this pawn on h6. Svidler doubles on the second rank, but simply rook to g3. This covers g2, king f7, rook to h8, rook to f2, and rook to h7 check from Shankland. And it was in this position that Svidler resigned the game. If white were to play instead of rook h7 check, let's say he takes the pawn, then after king g7, rook g6 check, king f7, this rook is trapped, and this makes life a bit more difficult for white. White can never move this pawn on h6 because then simply king takes g6. And if you go back rook to h6, then black simply plays king to g7. So here rook to h7 check was the most accurate move in the position. If black goes king e6, then you simply take the pawn. And if king g8, then rook to b7. Looking at this pawn, and if rook d6, then rook to c3. Threatening rook to c8, and this is just game over for black. So this is not the start that Svidler would have hoped for after a poor performance in the European Club Cup. Hopefully things get better for him in the next few games. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.